Welcome to the Wonder Podcast, Series 7. We're talking about early intervention. And today we're joined by Deann Wells, who is a TVI, teacher of the visually impaired in Arizona. She works for ASDB, which stands for what, Deann?
Arizona State School for the Deaf and Blind.
Great, thank you. We're so excited to have you here. And I know you and Brendan know each other because of working with your daughter. So I'm so excited to hear all about that relationship and more about your daughter. So thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Yes, Deann. So let's start with your daughter, because I know that kind of kicked off this whole pivot in your life, personally and professionally. Tell us about Whitney.
She was born 21 years ago. She has Charge syndrome. She has a heart condition, airway condition. She has a trach, G-tube, developmentally delayed. She has colobomas in her retina, which creates blind spots. She is also deaf. She is really amazing, though, with all of those challenges and how far she's come and how much she's overcome and how happy she is and how much she has enjoyed life. I'm just so proud of her. And she's taught me everything. Really. She inspired me to go back to school. I couldn't find a speech therapist for her. We were on waiting list for about 5 years. And so I decided to just take some speech classes. And then I ended up being so close to graduation that I ended up just graduating in speech. But then I worked in the school district as a speech therapy assistant and didn't love it and was looking for another direction. A friend of mine, a colleague, who actually was one of her teachers previously, told me that she was going to get her master's degree in teaching the visually impaired and told me about the program, and I was all in, and I have loved it. So, gosh, I think I've done it for how many years? Did I say 15 years or so? Now worked for the school district for many years, and then 4 years. It's been about 3.5 years ago, I switched over to Arizona State School for the Deaf and Blind so that I can work with those that are ages 0 to 5, mostly 0 to 3, but also preschool. My daughter went through these same early intervention programs. I was a big fan before I worked in it, and always wanted to come back to where she began, and help those families and those babies that are just beginning in this process.
So as a mom, what were some of the most effective early intervention practices that happened as a mom and different therapists coming into your home?
For her, it was physical therapy. She was in the home more than anybody. Maybe that was why. But she saw her as a whole, everything that was affecting her physically, her vision, her medical, all of the things that were making it difficult for her to connect that she even had legs and arms. She didn't even recognize that she had legs. And so just all of the things that she brought to the table was wonderful. The interesting thing is they didn't have a teacher of the deaf or a teacher of the visually impaired in my area at that time. And so they had some people come in that would help. And we ended up meeting someone from the Arizona Deaf Blind Project, Pat Jung, who probably was another person that was a huge impact because she followed her from baby through age 21. And I'm still in contact with Pat. This is her last year. She's actually retiring this year. But she had come to IEP meetings with us. She had helped us think about providers and therapies that we hadn't thought of. She helped us understand her communication and behaviors, and she provided trainings for her staff for her teachers and aides in the school district to help them understand why she was doing some of the crazy things she was doing back then. Positioning, how helping her to lay on the ground while she was testing helped her to focus and um, be able to complete tasks that she wasn't completing before because she felt like she was floating all day long, sitting in a chair. She needed to feel more stabilized while laying on the ground or in a beanbag chair while doing testing or doing things that took long amounts of focus. Just crazy little suggestions like that. She also gave the team a spelling test that was awesome. My daughter has a mild hearing loss in one ear and severe to profound hearing loss in the other. And she acts like she can hear a lot. And so you forget that she is deaf. And so she gave a spelling test and so the team could hear what it's like when you hear a word with a mild hearing loss. And I think they maybe got 25% on their spelling test. So it was just such a aha moment for everybody. And they loved it so much that they put it in her IEP to have Pat come back every year to provide training to the team. And that lasted probably till fourth or fifth grade. Till then. And then after that, Pat would just come in and check in and see if there was anything that they needed. But she was a great support.
That's so great to have on a continuity of care from the very beginning all the way through. And I know she's had some real big ups and downs medically as well. And so, almost a witness, all right, of where she's come from, what we know she knows, anybody doubting her intellect, like it's the continuity of care of having someone that's a real treat. So I met you, I was doing training on a communication device for a boy with very complex needs, eye trach and low vision. And did he have hearing loss? I can't remember. No, it was just relative strength. And so we were doing a system where he's listening to choices and then he's hitting a switch when he hears the one he wants. And one of the things that I just loved about you as an early interventionist, first of all, there's a lot of people in early intervention that are a little bit shying away from communication devices. It's like too early for some reason. What do you say? And you have since, by the way, referred people for evals as well, or been part of that process. And so what do you say to that, they're too young comment?
Well, I think that there's a combination of things that you need to look at. What are their abilities? Do they understand? Are they displaying that they understand maybe cause and effect? What kind of vision do they have? Do they show that they're trying to communicate? Do they need light to see? Because a lot of kids, they respond to things on an iPad or a light box, so that you keep those things in mind when you're thinking about how are they going to communicate. A lot of my kids, in fact, most kids with visual impairments have other things going on. A very common thing that I work on is children who have a cortical vision impairment or CVI. And one of the things that I do when I work with them is, what do I need to teach them so that they can communicate? What is that they need? And where are they, if they have CVI, where are they on the CVI chart? Are they in stage 1, stage 2, or stage 3? And that helps me to know what type of device they might need. If they're entering stage 2, then an iPad or a device might be appropriate because they're starting to respond to those things. And even if they can't see enough to determine exactly what that is, if they're visually attending and they're able to understand auditorily the direction, they're able to memorize what is that picture that has red and yellow on it representing. And they can learn that. And it can also improve their vision as well using a device when trying to communicate. So I've just seen kids. I work with kids when they're at the very beginning stages, maybe even in the training stages. But when I worked in the school district, I got to see the kids who had started out with those training games and who evolved into a more complex communication device, even with all of their challenges with CP and developmental delays. I guess because I had seen, what it can turn into, I think that it's important to encourage those kids that have the skills necessary to be able to access a device, to have an evaluation and see what you all think and see if you think that they are ready for that device.
You are so unique in the sense that your background's in speech and then you have training in TVI, right? Right. And so
Yeah.
you kind of have that dual threat in some ways. But one thing, what you're talking about, and I think about the kids that we work together with, is that with all IAAC communication devices that are being accessed with eye gaze, there are, I feel, we call them games because they're training their brain that they're controlling the screen and not just watching it. But it's without the demands of language first. So Moco is on the accent. There's Sensory IFX on the Tobii Dynavox. There's Look Lab on Grid on the Grid pad. There's Look to Learn that I think can be on all of them. There's lots of these different programs where they are learning to look and track in different directions and things. And you and I have talked about the benefits of those things because the cognitive load is not too high on the games, and then you transition into those memory things of I don't have the vision to see the whole thing, but I do know that in this location with these colors, with this relative shape, it means I'm going to get my book, my puzzle, my mom, whatever it is, right? But we have collaborated in looking at how to set up devices for young children, and I would say, for lack of a better word, young or maybe underdeveloped vision, and what is best. So first of all, talk about how vision changes even in those first few years. And second, what are some of those strategies that you like to advise people to do on their devices?
Well, at first, a lot of my kids with CVI aren't looking at anything.
Mm-hmm.
The eye doctor will say their eye is normal, but the connection to the brain is not normal, that there's an issue with that connection. And so the first thing we would start doing is presenting things that are lit up, a lit up orb hanging on a toy bar or something on a light box. We have illuminated cups and blocks and spinny toys that we put on a light box. We determine if they need movement. Do they need not only light, do they need it to move? Do they respond to bright, shiny materials? Will they turn to a sound when they hear it? Will they? And so we might start out with the toy bar with a light up orb and on one side and maybe jingle bells on the other side and see, are they trying to see or are they more interested in the auditory part of that toy? I worked with a PT recently where they worked with the child for 6 months on trying to just reach and grab a toy. And it wasn't until I brought in the light up orb hanging on the toy bar that they were finally, first day, reaching and grabbing at the toy because they just needed that special accommodation of having the light. And sometimes even in a dark room can help develop that vision. And then once they are able to see that, those brain connections start happening. And sometimes it happens very quickly. Once they can see something that's lit up, then I might move to a 3D object that I would place in front of a black felt board. It would be high contrast and see if they will reach to touch that object. if they show that they are able to reach and grab at simple, bright colored objects, I might put multiple objects in front of them to see a little more visual complexity. Um, Once they can do that, then I might start showing them books and pictures to see if they will visually attend to those, because 2D is very challenging for kids with CVI. Um, can they see a picture that is on a light box, or can they see one on an iPad, as well as in a book? I always print up pictures of a few of their favorite toys with a black background and try to match them with a real toy and show them that this is the same, that even though it's a picture, it represents the same thing as the real object. When they're looking at pictures, and it's something that we need to think about when we're picking pictures for their devices, real pictures of the real item is the easiest for them to make sense of. And then once they understand that, we can try a colored picture, a picture that somebody drew with colors on it. The most challenging is a black and white picture icon that has been drawn for someone with CVI. That's the most challenging. It's not impossible. Eventually they may get to that point, but it's not where I would start.
And I know that when we've worked on it, real pictures are good, but we like to grab the Google images with no background, meaning sometimes people think, oh, real pictures, great. And they take a picture of the toy, but the background is, the couch and the coffee table and the dog foot. And it's very complex, actually. So we have messed around with pulling a Google image and throwing it on a black background and making it a crisp picture. It's not just a picture we're taking off the device, right? With some higher contrast background. Every once in a while, what we're taking a picture of is black, and so the background we have to mess around with that too, right? So I know that we've worked through some contrast stuff around that as well.
It's so nice that also that there's so many tools available to do that. Like now in PowerPoint, it will do that for you, or remove BG is a free way.
Or your iPhone.
Drop your picture in. Yeah.
I worked with a little boy who was learning to spell his name on his old Dynavox. And I remember that the improvement in his ability to visually attend to the alphabet when we changed the background from white to yellow. Just having that yellow background helped him to visually attend longer, and he was able to spell his name a little bit faster. So sometimes you just have to figure out what colors are going to help them, what helps them to see the best, what accommodations do they need visually to access that device.
Deann, you're talking like a detective, because I feel like that's what we do, right? We do the same thing. There's so much about observation, and you're observing all those the vision characteristics, like the movement and latency and all of those things, right? And seeing what happens, and that's similar to what we're doing. And it's just neat to hear how much overlap there is. And you and Brenda are a great example of teamwork on that.
I love that she invites anyone and everyone to come to her trainings and to evals, because I think that collaboration is how they're going to make the best choices for their device.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's reminding me of, Deann, is we walked into an evaluation recently, and we start the evaluation with a little bit of a parent interview. And Mom wasn't in the room yet, so we were talking to Dad, and we said, okay, primary diagnosis is cerebral palsy. Any other diagnosis? Nope. Everything's good. And then you walked in.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
you're surprised.
Okay. So actually, the paperwork we got didn't say there was a visual impairment. And we had already interviewed the parent who did not inform us that there was a visual impairment. And when you walked in, I was like, oh, and here's the missing piece we were looking for. Like, here's what we actually, another huge piece that we need to consider. We hadn't trialed the device with a child yet. We were just gathering information, but what was filled out by the referring SLP did not refer to vision. And this is not to dig on anybody involved in the process, but just to know that when the thing about inviting anybody and everybody who wants to be part of the process is we could have had a huge part. I mean, once we put the device in front of him, I'm fairly certain we would have determined the visual impairment that was what it was. But when you walked in, I was like, oh, there is a piece here that no one's articulated to us in written or in verbal form. And we're about to evaluate them for a device. And there was no indication. Do you remember this, Val?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like, oh, you're here. So that means there's a whole nother piece to this that that isn't written down. So I know I love collaborating with you. And then once we get the device here in Arizona, kids qualify for 4 sessions of coaching. And I try to overlap with you at least once or twice in those 4, just so we're progressing the child through with vision in mind. And with the boy who wasn't using vision, we still were the continuity of care. He was in foster and moved homes, and you and I were the bridge there before he moved on to other therapists. Where this is what he was doing at this home. This is what his vision looked like. This is where he's made some improvements. This is where he is now, and so yeah, we got to kind of tackle that together.
I don't think they would have guessed that he had the abilities that he had by just meeting him. I think that they would have guessed that he was much lower. So it was nice that they didn't have to figure out and reinvent the wheel.
Deann,
But
I'm curious. So thinking of that and not always knowing what the vision is like for our very young children, right? These babies and thinking about your daughter 21 years ago, I'm curious, at what point did you have a diagnosis of Charge syndrome? And then also, what were some indicators that that her vision wasn't typical? Or did you know that right away?
well, when she was born, she had 3 of the 6 letters in Charge. Charge syndrome stands for, it's an acronym. C is for coloboma of the retina. H is for heart condition. Um, E is for ears deformity and usually means deafness as well. Let's see, CHA is atresia. There's a bone growing in the back of their nose that makes it difficult for them to breathe through the back of their nose. R is for, well, back then they called it retardation in growth and development. I think they changed that word to regression. And E, like I said, was for ears. So she had, G is for genitalia deformity. For the girls, they don't end up having their period. So we knew that she was born with a heart condition and that they could not push the nasal cannula up the nose. So we knew about those 2. We knew about the ear deformity. And so they called in the retinal specialist to confirm Charge because they suspected with the 3. And once they have 4 out of the 6, they could diagnose her with Charge syndrome. So she was in the NICU when she was diagnosed. We knew about the heart condition before she was born, and they were suspecting Down syndrome, to be honest. I was reading all about Down syndrome before she was born. But so we knew in the NICU, and she stayed there for about 6 weeks. But when it came to communication, she did not understand verbal. Even though she could hear, she did not respond. She was very frustrated with verbal communication. We in preschool were encouraged to use, the Big Mac or, any kind of low-tech devices. And she just could not handle the cause and effect of any toy, like any pull string toy where the toy talks, or if you push a button and it sings and lights light up, she would have a meltdown and it would be so big that we couldn't calm her down for hours. So we felt that.
Sorry, Deann. So she could hear, you said?
She has a mild hearing loss in her right ear. So
Okay.
she would appear that she could hear a lot, but
Mm.
she was not responding to verbal language. So she's really unique because I encourage different things for my students or for the babies I work with than what I did with my own daughter because of her unique challenges with sensory issues. And the fact that sign language just made sense to her. She went into preschool with 100 signs. She
Oh,
knew
wow.
100 signs. So that made sense to her, and we used that to teach her verbal language. Um,
Was she signing expressively or she receptively understood them?
both,
Hmm.
both. And so I mean, she's really a unicorn in that way. I don't think very many people um, go with just sign language like that. But we would use picture communication too. But the teacher would complain that, there's so many um, vocabulary words that she knows, and, the pictures were cumbersome, and she couldn't remember all the signs. And so it took about a year for the district to finally approve a sign language interpreter to come in. And they said that her tantrums reduced by about 60% because she was able to communicate.
And how old?
Um,
How old was she then?
she was 4. She was 4 when we had a sign language interpreter. But once she got a little older and she loved Toy Story and really wanted to play with this Woody doll and pull the string and make him talk. And she couldn't, she would try, she would look at it and she wouldn't want to do it. She'd get ready and then she couldn't do it. But eventually she did it and she was so happy and she would play with it all day long. And so as soon as I saw that, I let the SLP know at the school district that she's ready to try a communication device. And they came in and they did an evaluation. She was about 8 years old. And they said they'd never seen anybody take to a device so quickly because she had just so much vocabulary and understanding of language already that it really made sense to her. And they used it at lunchtime to communicate with her friends. They used it when she didn't have access to her sign language interpreter. We've been through several different devices since, and we just had another eval recently, and she still prefers was it the Go Talk icons? I think that's what she chose.
No, it's the touch chat.
Oh, Touch Chat. That's right. Touch
But
Chat.
it was symbol sticks, which is all in a lot of devices, including GoTalk has that too. But she is literally one of the most social people you will ever meet. Not most social child with a disability, not most social with charge, not most social and her most social people you will ever meet.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine how frustrating and
Yeah.
what kind of behaviors you must have seen
Yeah.
when she didn't have a consistent way to be who she actually is, which is just interacting constantly.
All the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So that frustration, what did that look like? Tantrum, what did that look like for her?
Yeah, she would bite herself, her finger. I mean, there's a callus on her finger from that. She would bite her finger out of frustration, and that's some type of a sensory input that would help to calm her
Mhm.
down. She has learned since to, do deep breathing. She does rainbow breathing where she'll say the color of the color and then breathe, and then the next color in the rainbow and breathe. And that changes her brain to calm. But yeah, back then it was really hard to get her to calm down. She had sensory, I don't know if you want to call it a sensory diet because it wasn't so much that they would do the same thing every day, but it was how to decompress. It was taking her on walks in her wheelchair at the time. It was going into the sensory room and going on the swing or rolling up in a tight blanket or, just finding what that was that she needed. And that she was able to choose from picture PECs, which sensory activity she thought would help her to calm down. She understood what they were doing and why they were there and what she needed to do, and she could communicate what her body needed at that time.
That sensory piece
And
would be so important, and to be able to give our kids access to the words, right? To say when they need something, when they need a break, what is it going to be that I get to choose? And I just, sorry, Brenda, I was just thinking about cause and effect with the pull toy. You were talking about the pull toy and how she was kind of anxious about the pull toy. And, we think about cause and effect and we talk about this, as something you're born with that, you cry because of something, right? You're showing cause and effect. And it sounded like she had this idea of what would happen with that toy, whether it was like a sensory, it would maybe bother her, or it's unexpected, right? And I just love hearing you talk about how, you're her mom, you know her, but just all these things that you observed also, right? Going back to that observation, and how you knew she needed signs, she needed access to
Yeah,
how,
alternative way to communicate for sure.
right, right. And well, thinking about parents who are in your situation, who are in that situation when she was little, and you're trying to think of how can I best interact with my child who is deaf and has vision challenges. And what were some of the first things that you did, or how did you first tackle that?
Well, when talking to Pat from the Deaf Blind Project, she had said, a lot of kids with Charge syndrome have a difficult time with language. We just have to throw everything at them and hope something sticks. So you want to do pictures, you want to do verbal, you want to do sign language, you want to do the devices, you want to try everything and see what makes sense, and you just go with that, whatever makes sense to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that really stuck with me. And I knew when she said that, what made sense to her was sign language.
Mm.
And so we just stuck with that, as well as supporting with picture communication. I mean, I took her to a mental health professional, and they didn't know sign language. They tried bringing in an interpreter, but because some of her signs are her own signs, when she's, naming her brother or naming her favorite toy or whatever, it's her own sign. She's not finger spelling at that point. She is now, but and the therapist was able to draw pictures and have her make choices on those pictures of what's a better choice. And she could tell her that a better choice would be go lay down on a beanbag chair by pointing to the picture. And so she was just, I think that it was really hard for me to keep up with her need for language, to be honest. I mean, I wasn't fluent in sign language. It's almost as if, I'm an English speaker and I had someone born who spoke Spanish, and I all of a sudden had to learn a whole new language and had a difficult time keeping up with her.
Mm-hmm.
I still do, but luckily I can ask her, how do you sign? And she can show me.
That's awesome.
How did she learn how to spell so well?
She has a photographic memory. If she sees something, she remembers it. She just has had a sign language interpreter spelling things to her in class, and she remembered it. She has done spelling tests. I remember when she was in junior high, they recognized that was really a gift she had to be able to spell words that most kids in her class could not. And so they created a whole spelling bee so that she could display her talent in
Oh,
spelling. Yeah. So
But she
so
does have visual impairment. So she does have spots in her vision.
yes.
So
Yes.
she's also doing some of her own visual investigation as she's looking even at a written word to get all the features of a written word.
Well, we still don't know exactly where those blind spots are, but we suspect they're all up high. Because you might sign to her and she's not responding because you're standing and she's sitting and she doesn't see you signing to her. So it's something
Mhm.
that we mostly talk to the interpreters about, your placement and making sure that she can see what you're signing because of those blind spots. Her main field of vision was very good. So
Mhm.
that was helpful. She was very lucky.
So what do we know about visual development that's important in early intervention?
The the kids that I'm working with CBI or all children overall?
Maybe both.
Well, we use the CBI chart by Christine Roman Lansky. I'm sure I'm saying her name wrong.
well, that's okay.
Um, but
That's how we say it,
that
Romansky.
that that is what determines where they are visually, and that tells us exactly what we need to work on next. So it helps us to know how to present things visually and how to stretch them a little bit. And work on helping them to see colors that they aren't responding to. And hopefully, eventually those colors are going to make sense, and those connections to the brain with those new colors are going to make that connection. So once you know what from that evaluation, that's going to tell you exactly how they need things presented. We also test them developmentally through the organ assessment. It's kind of like the DAISY, but it is specific for children who are visually impaired. A lot of times they are scoring very low on self-help skills because they can't see to do a lot of the self-help things. So they have other questions that they might be able to do showing that they do have those self-help skills. And they might not score as low in that area because it's specific to them. And they're not going to ask them questions. What do you see in this picture on that assessment? It's
Right.
more on observation and parent interview as well.
Right.
So what are the early signs that a child might benefit from early intervention?
Well, actually, I'm the one that reviews and approves people that have applied for early intervention for vision in Maricopa County. So what I'm looking at is visual diagnoses that might affect them developmentally. Even if it's nystagmus, where their eyes are wiggly, it's pretty mild and you might not think that they would qualify, but they actually do. We can come with them to see if it is affecting them developmentally. What we would do is test their developmental skills and see what challenges they have and see if we can make some vision accommodations to help them in those areas. We might also help them advocate with their doctor or help them with patching or wearing glasses, those kinds of things. As far as signs, really, it's just if they have a vision diagnosis and you are worried that it may be affecting them developmentally, a parent can refer themselves by going to the ASDB website. There's a link there where they can fill out a referral form.
And
well, what I'm thinking about is how do you even know to take your kid? So I'll tell you what happened to me. My kid was in, I think, kindergarten when they came through and did one of these things where they cover one eye and say read. And they covered my son's eye and he's like, oh, I can't see out of that eye, is what my 5-year-old said.
Yeah. You might
And I
notice
was like, what? And there was no indicators to me. So we ended up going and finding out a scratched cornea and we had to do some patching and some other things. And then I don't know exactly how all this worked, but there was enough in repair over time that he's fine. But what I'm saying is I didn't know what visual impairment looked, and there was that we weren't testing children's vision at those young ages like we do in that birth screening for hearing. And if he wasn't verbal, we still don't know how to test vision very well. So what are parents looking for? What are they looking for in their observational skills with their babies to go, wait, something's not right? I understand the nystagmus, right? That's the kind of like movement of the eyes. Some children very young, their eyes aren't working together. Maybe that's an indicator. What are some other things we could be looking for?
Well, if they're not looking at their caregiver, if they're not giving eye contact, that could be an indication. Depth perception with your son, you might have seen him overreaching or underreaching when putting a slot in a toy or using the ring toy. You might see a lot of overreaching and underreaching with the unilateral vision loss. You might see them when they're walking, falling down or not noticing that there's a curb when and tripping on curbs. Because someone with depth perception might not notice those curbs. So if one eye is better than the other, those are the things you would notice. Most of the time it's just, are they looking at their caregiver? Are they looking at toys? Are they reaching for toys when they see them? And those are the things that might indicate you might, maybe we should go take them to an eye doctor and see if there's anything going on. I mean, they can test for glasses as a baby. They don't typically give glasses unless it's a severe vision loss because their vision is always changing when they're young. So they wait a little bit before prescribing glasses usually, but
I think that people don't always know that, yeah, they can do a lot in a visual exam without verbal output.
yeah.
So the child doesn't have to know all the letters or the E or even the pictures that are in the distance that you may have seen in the past. Like there's a lot that an ophthalmologist can do in assessing the health and the state of an eye
Mhm.
that we don't know about necessarily.
And I love the examples that you gave, Deann, of things you might notice. It's funny, Brenda, we had a similar situation with my daughter, and she was very verbal. And at 3, she was telling us it was foggy in her eyes. And her doctor, who we love, gave her, allergy drops for her eyes for a long time. And she would just always say it's foggy until we found out she wasn't seeing it all through that one eye. She had amblyopia. And so it made me think about that memory made me think about what you said is one of the ways you support families is to help them advocate with their doctor. What are some things that how do you do that? How do you support families to advocate with their doctor about
Well,
vision?
I went to an appointment today actually with one of the families I'm working with, and she was really concerned about distance vision. And they said they weren't going to dilate, so they won't be testing for distance vision. But I asked, is it possible to test for distance vision without dilating? And she said, well, let me talk to the doctor. So that got her talking to the doctor about her concern with distance vision. And her doctor was able to go into much more depth in explaining why she's not concerned right now about her distance vision, but it's something to keep an eye on. And she just said she has an astigmatism, but she can see fine right now. It's just as she gets older, she probably will need glasses. It's something we keep an eye on. So it's just speaking up when I know the mom wanted to ask more information, but didn't want to step on the nursing assistant's toes or the doctor's toes. And so I would just bring up more questions that I know that the parent had already talked to me about to make
Mhm.
sure that they didn't leave without understanding um, their vision and their concerns. So you don't want to just go in there and say nothing and allow the doctor just to say what they want to say and then leave. You want to make sure that your questions are answers, that your concerns, that there is no dumb question. Even though the doctor was not going to test for distance vision, she was able to help her understand that at this age, it's okay to not have distance vision, and we'll keep an eye on the distance vision as she gets older.
Right. Well, and
Yeah.
especially because some of these um, kids, we're looking at in early intervention have kind of rare syndromes, right? Or something that the doctor may have not seen so much. Um,
Yes.
so
A lot of my kids will come in with nystagmus as a diagnosis, and we find out later on they actually had CVI. And
Mhm.
so a lot of times when it's not just the eye movement, but mom says he's not giving me eye contact, and the doctor said everything was normal with the eyes. He's not reaching for anything. He's not looking at anything. And so we can do an assessment, and I can go with them to the doctor and say, we have these concerns. What do you think? A lot of times they'll go and have an MRI to see if they see any challenges in the brain that might cause difficulty in that connection. But without expressing those additional concerns, the doctor looks at the health of the eye. They're a baby. Um, they bring out a light, and kids with CVI, they can see lights. So they're tracking the light, but what happens if it's not lit up? Maybe they're not tracking anything other than those bright lights in a dark room. So it's something to go over with the parents, if they're noticing symptoms of CVI, then I go through the list with the parents to see if there's anything else that they are noticing, and then try to help them express to the doctor what they're seeing so that they're not being ignored. And that because with CVI, the earlier they are working on those connections, the better their prognosis. So we want to get that diagnosis as soon as possible if that's what they have.
that's very important with timing. And so just helping parents realize to trust their gut, I guess is kind of part of it, right?
Yeah.
You know something is off or not expect how you would expect.
Your background in with your daughter with vision and hearing, I think you know that is those sensory systems are fingerprints, man. There's no two kids that have ever been the same in that sense, right? And so you just what you do is you end up developing a bag of tricks for all kinds of combinations of this deafblind, right? And so this is what they can see, this is what they can hear. So what does stimulus look like for them? How should educational materials be provided for them? What is
Yeah.
their relative strength? And there's just a lot of observational skills required in early intervention, especially if the child is not functionally verbal, to give you more information.
One thing I've learned from the Deafblind Project is that you would think that if they're missing 5% of their environment from vision and 5% from hearing, that they are missing 5% or maybe 10%, but really you multiply that number, they're missing 25% of what is being learned in their environment. And so keeping that in mind, you have to make sure that they're experiencing everything in the way that they can as often as possible in order to learn from their environment, whether it's through tactual experiences, getting them out in the community, outside. A lot of our parents are afraid to take their babies outside because they're sick all the time. And it's so important to experience life and get them outside and to learn from their environment as much as possible.
You know, you mentioned tactile. Did you ever try tactile symbols with your daughter?
Well, her vision was good, so she could
Okay.
do picture symbols. But I've used tactile symbols a lot with my children who are blind. Yes, for sure. I had one little boy who was so anxious anytime he would work with anybody, and they could maybe get 5 minutes of work. And I went to a training. She had taught me how to use a tactile timer. And it was just a strip with a Velcro in the middle and 5 blocks Velcroed to the timer. And you would touch each block and say, we're going to work on this, and we're going to work on this, we're going to work on this, and then we're going to work on this. So first, we're going to do this one. And we remove the block and we work on that. And then next, we're going to work on this. Touch the block, remove it, I think we usually put it in a bin, and then we work on it. And he was able to work 30 minutes to an hour, just understanding what he was doing. And he didn't panic about when he was going to be done. I shared that with the PT and OT, and they all use it and said that they couldn't believe how much of a change that made for him to understand what he was working on and how long he was going to be working on it with just that little tactile timer.
What I love about that is they didn't overcomplicate it. They didn't feel like they had to get a tactile representation of each task they would ever going to do with him. But basically, it's a visual schedule, but in tactile form, if for people that are thinking about it. And so it's just like it's a placeholder. You're doing 5 tasks, and we're working through this left to right, which is a pre-reading, pre-braille, pre-everything. And so I love that. It's such a simple idea of 5 blocks, Velcro, let's go. I can do 5 things with my kid. And if my first thing is going to be a book, it's still a block. It's just, this is what we're doing for this block. And it's a tactile representation. I love that. It's such a simple idea that, like you said, transfers to OT skills, PT skills, whatever kind teachers getting involved, you can say, we're doing these 5 things before your break. And that decreases the anxiety of all of the unknowns of what's about to happen. I'm going to check out because I don't know how long this thing lasts. I don't know what we're doing. I don't know. I don't have enough information to regulate my sensory system to even tolerate 1 minute of work right now. That you prep them with a sensory system that is a strength, and It can work for 30 minutes. I mean, that's a great, very practical idea, Deann.
Yeah. And I mean, as adults, we want to know how long we're doing something that is maybe not our favorite thing, right?
Yeah, my daughter had a similar anxiety, so I understood that anxiety piece of the unknown. She wanted to see a picture of her favorite thing on there somewhere. She wanted to know if I do this, this, and this, eventually I get to do my favorite thing. So with her, we used picture communication. Would always have some reward at the end of her picture schedule. I do tactile schedules too with my kids, and I don't do a miniature. I do what tactually they might feel in that activity. That's usually,
Mm-hmm.
if it's going on the bus, it's going to be the seatbelt,
Hmm.
um, those types of things. So I try to make it feel like whatever that activity is that
Mhm.
they're going to be experiencing.
Yeah. Well, we're so glad you could be here. And it was really special for us to hear about your daughter and her experience in early intervention, and also to hear now what she's doing and all the multiple modalities of communication that she's used and uses and that you support, which is really fantastic. And then to hear some of those indicators of early vision skills that we can think about with our young kids and babies, really helpful. So.
And I hope it just inspires other AAC evaluators to include vision more often. I think the vision specialists can contribute so much to the quality of the evaluation, and I think that the speech pathologist can get creative using the vision suggestions on how to, improve the communication skills. I mean, I think we learn from each other every time we work together.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This podcast is produced by the Special Education Technology Center, administered by Central Washington University, and funded in part by OSPI. However, the content does not necessarily represent the policy of CWU and OSPI, and you should not assume endorsement by the state government.